Shalom, welcome to Challenging Torah, project of the Malibu Jewish Center and Synagogue. We are challenged by the realities of our world, and we are challenged to look into Torah for guidance for our actions and our judgments about what we do with our lives. Abba Ibn famously stood in front of the UN, held up a piece of paper and said, "This is the 3,000-year deed that gives the state of Israel and the Jewish people the right to return to their land." True. But there was another part to that story. It wasn't exactly their land. "The land is mine," God says, "and you must keep my commandments. You are but strangers and sojourners with me. You're tenants on this land, and you have, first right. But you need to keep my commandments, or as they later tell us in Deuteronomy, you will be vomited out of the land." So we constantly need to keep this in mind. And Behar, this Torah portion, has an interesting vision of social justice that God tells Moses on Mount Sinai, where no one owns the land in perpetuity. The land belongs to God. So every 7 years, you are to release any slaves that are kinsmen. You may keep foreign slaves. And every 50 years, there is a jubilee. Whistle blows, you go back to your original holdings. It was an agriculturally based society. All wealth was really in land, and it was rebalanced every time. Difficult for us to accept. But this plan guaranteed there would be no permanent poor, no underclass. If your kinsman was in need, you needed to redeem your kinsman. An interesting social concept, but under it God says, if you do not give the land its rest, the land will get a Shabbat every 7 years. If you do not, you will be exiled from the land. The land will no longer be yours. Fast forward 2,000 years. We know we lost the Second Temple due to civil strife and infighting, and we see that story happening today in Israel. It's been a tough week in Israel this week. Israel, basically, Netanyahu fired first a Brigadier General Golan, who spoke out against how the country is treating its Palestinians, and made some remark that brought up the Holocaust and our need to be sensitive. And he was supported by Yalon, who was the commander-in-chief, notice the was, of the IDF and the head of the Defense Department. And Netanyahu got rid of him and replaced him with Avigdor Lieberman, who is very right-wing and very vocal in his racism against Arabs. This isn't a secret. Netanyahu needed the coalition. But there are many who in Israel are speaking up. Amazingly, Thomas Friedman, who is pretty center-right as the political spectrum goes, wrote a column about it this week, ending with the words, "This is a very dark hour for Israel." It's frightening, considering this Torah portion. Ari Shavit, who wrote My Promised Land, spoke about how amazing the miracle of Israel is, and that we're now 100 years since the Balfour Declaration. Next year, Israel will turn 70. It's 50 years since the Six-Day War. We have a land that is economically stable, that its inhabitants have been brought together from all corners of the earth. Israel's a miracle. I've been part of that miracle my whole, even semi-adult life since I'm 17 years old. But it's time to take stock. It's time to ask, if you do not obey my commandments, at the core of those commandments this week is the statement, Al tanu ish et achiv. A human being will not cause great distress to a fellow human being. Achiv means brother, but where do we draw those lines? Ari Shavit ends his article by saying, The mutual responsibility we felt towards one another has eroded, and a growing economic divide, alongside intensifying tribal and political fissures, has plunged Israel into a deep internal crisis. The Israeli Republic is under attack, and Israeli democracy is under siege. Those are tough words. Tough words from a very prominent, middle-of-the-road person who writes in Haaretz. It's time for us to take stock. Our actions count. We are but sojourners. We are given this land not to own it, but to dwell in it and fulfill God's commandments to take care of the widow, the orphan, the stranger, to not distress one another, to give the land its Shabbat, and to be as conscious as possible. That's our challenge. Torah here serves us well. Shabbat Shalom.